Welcome again to the Libertarian Solution YouTube videocasts. I'm Nick Coons, and this is part 2 of Immigration and Border Security. And if you haven't watched the first video, please do that before watching this one. It's very important to watch that video, because if you don't, you're going to be left behind. So, pick up on that first video. If you've seen that one, great, you're in the right place. This is part 2. In this part, I want to be talking about, to start out with, whatever I can cram into 10 minutes, I guess, amnesty. Amnesty is the very negative connotation sounding word assigned by those who oppose illegal immigration and who oppose providing any sort of legal process to those who are currently here. Of course, they want to say that, well, you support amnesty and that's a bad thing, and if you want to let those people stay here, if you want to give them a path to legal residency of some sort. But I want to break that down a little bit, because I don't think it's... I'm not in a position where I think that my ego is bruised if someone breaks a law of a country that I live in, especially if it's a bad law. As a lot of you probably know, I don't support taxation, so if someone can get away with not paying a tax for whatever reason, not paying their income taxes, getting around sales taxes, whatever it is, I'm all for that. I don't feel like, well, they've hurt me in some way because they've broken a law. Like, who cares about... I don't care about the law. I care about people not infringing other people's rights. So, you know, no murdering, stabbing, stealing, raping, slavery, any of those sorts of things. And any of the laws that are pretty bad, where they don't do anything, to protect the individual's rights, go for it. You know, do whatever you want. It doesn't matter to me that you broke it. I don't care. I'm not going to have my pride or my ego bruised because of that, and I'm not going to say, well, you broke our laws, or any kind of anything like that. So I think that's where amnesty goes. It's like, well, they broke our laws. We can't let them stay here. We can't give them anything. They need to be punished for breaking our laws. Well, let's look at that. In our past, in U.S. history, we've had some pretty bad laws, things that are not very controversial, that we all understand are bad laws, and slavery is a very good example. So up until, I think it was 1863, we had slavery in place in several places, many places in the U.S. and a lot of the southern states, and even in some of the northern states at that time. So imagine 1862, a slave escapes. So he's a slave. We know that slavery is wrong. You know, we're looking back at this. We know that slavery is wrong. But the slave escapes, and so he's committed a crime because, well, slavery is legal and he's owned by his master, and his master didn't let him go, so he's a criminal now. So what do we do to this criminal? Do we take them to court? Do we arrest them? Do we imprison them? Or do we say, you know what, this is a really bad law, let's get rid of the law, and anyone who was previously a slave and who has escaped, we're not going to prosecute them for escaping slavery, because that was a stupid law. Well, someone might come along who doesn't like the idea of breaking the laws no matter how stupid they are and say, well, that's amnesty. You can't let that ex-slave go. They broke the law. It doesn't matter that the law was bad. They broke the law. You've got to prosecute them. You can't just let them go. That's amnesty. So that's a very good parallel. It's exactly the same thing. The immigration laws are horrible. The idea that people can't come here legally, or can't come here to this country and work and get a job. I mean, what business of that is the government's? You know, if I'm an employer and I want to hire someone, that's between me and them. No one else can be involved in that transaction legitimately. That's between the two of us. If I want to hire someone who's from another country and I say, yeah, come on, you know, stay out here, and they bring some money with them and they rent an apartment and they pay for that apartment, and the landlord wants to accept their money, and I want to give them a job and I want to pay them, and they go to the grocery store and the grocery store wants to take their money, and what business of that is the government's? You know, this whole amnesty thing it's an ego bruise. It's claiming that your ego's bruised. It's all it is. The fact that they broke a law is completely irrelevant. We recognize that the law is stupid. The law doesn't make any sense. The law completely goes the wrong way. This is why I don't support something like Arizona's bill, SB 1070, the one passed a couple of months ago, back in April, I think. You know, of course, I'm in the minority here in this state. Many Arizonans do support it, especially people of the conservative bent. They support it wholeheartedly for the most part. Wholeheartedly for the most part. And I say that because I guess not all of them support it, but the ones that do support it wholeheartedly. So they wonder why I don't support it. Well, it's just a copy of the federal law. Well, the federal law is bad too. It doesn't do anything to solve the problem because it doesn't recognize why people come here. If you're trying to stop the influx of people from coming here, well, first of all, you've got to, again, going back to the first video, why do we want to stop the influx of people from coming here? Well, there are people coming here because they want welfare. Well, great. We stop giving away welfare to immigrants, and they won't come here for that. Well, they're taking our jobs. We already talked about in the last video. That's nonsense. That's kindergarten economics. That's not true. It doesn't cause any negative problems for Americans. So as far as people coming here, what's the problem? What's the deal? Why is this a bad thing? Well, one of the problems we've already covered the process is extremely onerous. It's very difficult. In fact, for many people, for the vast majority of people, it's impossible. There is no path, even legally, to any kind of legal residency in the U.S. We've talked about the freebies thing. Okay, well, we've covered that part. If we've figured out how to solve that, we don't give out freebies to non-U.S. citizens. We don't give them any taxpayer-funded services, Social Security, public education, welfare, unemployment, any of those sorts of things. Well, what about the drug runners? We've got drug lords coming in through our southern border. They're bringing drugs into the U.S. Well, for any libertarian, I think this one's pretty much no-brainer because we already know that the reason that drugs are so popular is because they are prohibited. They are illegal. That's what makes them so popular. That's what makes them so profitable, and the profit is what drives people to do that. Now, I understand libertarians get this theory, but it's more than a theory because we had the exact same thing happen to alcohol in the 20s. The 18th Amendment was passed prohibiting the production and sale of alcohol across the entire country. We had a federal ban on alcohol. And throughout the 20s, it wasn't until 1933, I think, when the 21st Amendment was passed that repealed the 18th Amendment. Well, during the time that alcohol was banned, first of all, there was no reduction in alcohol use. There was a small dip when it first went into place, and then it quickly went far beyond where it was. Then, of course, when it was repealed, there was a quick increase in alcohol use, and then it dipped back down to its normal levels. But overall, there was an increase in alcohol abuse when it was illegal. There was an increase in price, and last but not least, there was a massive increase in violence. That was the beginning of organized crime outside of government. Here in the U.S. was during the prohibition of alcohol, and that's non-controversial. That information is all established. We all understand that, or at least I would think so. And the reason is because if something's prohibited, it's much more expensive and more dangerous to produce, especially with drugs. Look at drugs. Why is it that you have drug dealers going to schools trying to get children interested in using drugs, as opposed to why aren't they selling them Pepsi or Wonder Bread or bubble gum? Things that are much less dangerous. I mean, if I went to a school and I got caught selling a stick of gum to a kid, the punishment would be a lot less than if I was selling them a bag of weed. So why would I take the risk? Why would I do that? Well, because one is addictive and the other is not. You can get someone addicted to something, and of course, because it's limited legally by its prohibition, by the ban, the supply is limited. Well, limited supply causes an increase in price because the demand is still there, but the supply goes away, so the price goes way up for it. So now, as a drug dealer, let's say, in this hypothetical situation, I have a massive incentive to go out and get as many people addicted to drugs as I possibly can because they're going to come back to me and they're going to continue buying, and it's much more profitable because there are very few supplies available. On the other hand, why would I go and say, hey, you got to try this new stick of gum and go and sell that to some kids at a schoolyard? Because I have to compete on price. Because if they try and they like it, who says they're going to keep buying from me? They can go anywhere and get it. They can go down to the nearest convenience store around the corner and get it. No big deal. Why is it that they would get it from me? Well, they wouldn't, unless I had the best deal. Well, the only way I have the best deal is if my profit margin was really low, and of course, what's the fun in that? But the profit margins are really high when it comes to prohibited substances. And then because there are no legal methods of resolving any disputes, you can't resolve disputes legally. So that causes a lot of turf warfare and all the problems that we see in in the drug prohibition area. So if we, the clear, easy, simple example there is to go through and remove the criminalizing penalties on drugs and make them legal. Legalize drugs. Now, of course, if you look back at historical facts, drug usage and that sort of thing, drug usage was far less when it was legal. It's far more that it's illegal. That's perfectly predictable and understandable, knowing that the prohibition of a substance and the reduced supply causes increased demand. I don't want to try and get off the immigration topic here too much, but it's perfectly reasonable and understandable that prohibiting a substance causes its further abuse and causes violent crime around that substance. So if we get rid of the drug prohibition laws, get rid of drug prohibition altogether, then we don't have people running drugs into this country anymore, because this is not a profitable place to sell them. Because there's plenty of supply available. There's no incentive anymore to get people addicted. Within about 10 years, addiction rates would drop significantly, especially among the highly addictive drugs, because there'd be no motivation to get anyone addicted to them in the first place, because there'd be no large profits to be made. So that gets rid of the drug runners coming across the border. So I think that pretty much covers everything as far as why people come to this country and how we solve the problem of having all the desirables come to the country and continue to have them flood in here because we want them. I mean, the people who are hardworking and great and all those sorts of good things, we want them here in this country because they contribute to our economy. They make life better for us. They're the ones that built this country. We want them here. What we don't want are the people who are trying to suck off the system, who are trying to peddle drugs and those sorts of things. Well, you get rid of those things very simply by getting rid of the incentives to do that. So hopefully that puts out the libertarian position and helps to solidify why the libertarian position is what it is as far as a more open borders position, why amnesty is not a bad thing, and starts to try and quell all that drive for saying, hey, we need secure borders. It's absolutely not true. We don't need to build a big fence. We don't need to lock down the borders. We don't need more Border Patrol agents. That doesn't solve the issue at all. So if you have any questions, any concerns, any comments, anything more that you'd like answered on this, I know it's difficult. It's a complex topic, and so I might not have covered everything. Please feel free to send an email, post a comment, get a hold of us any way you can. Thanks for tuning in.